The first light of an early summer morning stretched across the towering mountains of Yellowstone National Park, Montana. A thin layer of mist floated quietly above endless pine forests. Birdsong echoed through the peaceful valley. Everything seemed perfectly calm. Forest Ranger Daniel Brooks started the engine of his National Park pickup truck. Beside him, his 6-year-old German Shepherd Max sat proudly in the passenger seat. For 6 years, they had rarely been separated on any mission. Max was far more than a working dog. He was Daniel's closest friend. The truck slowly rolled toward the northern patrol area of the park, a place that attracted hundreds of campers every summer. As Daniel drove, he glanced at the weather monitor mounted on the dashboard. The sky was crystal clear. No storms, no heavy winds. It looked like another routine patrol until Max suddenly lifted his head. His ears stood straight. His nose twitched constantly as he sniffed the air. Daniel smiled. "Smell a deer, buddy." Max didn't react. His eyes remained fixed on the towering cliffs in the distance. The truck continued for another 10 minutes before reaching Eagle Valley Campground. A family was unloading camping gear beside a beautiful mountain stream. The father looked to be around 40. The mother smiled as she unpacked supplies. Their 10-year-old daughter with long blonde hair tied into a ponytail immediately noticed Max. "He's beautiful." Daniel parked the truck and walked over. "Planning to camp here?" The father nodded. "We drove all the way from Seattle. It's our first family vacation in years." Daniel looked around. The location was breathtaking. A wide meadow stretched beside a crystal-clear stream. Behind it stood a towering cliff that rose hundreds of feet into the sky. Beyond the cliffs lay endless forests covering the surrounding mountains. As always, Daniel offered a friendly reminder. "If the weather changes unexpectedly, leave the area immediately." The mother smiled. "We'll be careful." Just then, Max slowly walked toward the base of the cliff. He lowered his head and sniffed the ground carefully. Then a low growl escaped his throat. Daniel frowned. That wasn't normal. Max had never reacted like this at an ordinary campsite. The little girl walked closer. "What is he looking for?" Daniel shook his head. "I'm not sure." Max continued pacing along the rocky cliff. He finally stopped beside a massive boulder, his nose pressed against the ground. A moment later, he lifted his head and stared high above. Then he barked. Once. Twice. The barking became louder. The family exchanged puzzled looks. The father chuckled. "Maybe he smells a squirrel." Daniel didn't laugh. He knew Max too well. The German Shepherd never gave warnings without a reason. Daniel walked closer to inspect the cliff. Everything looked normal. No falling rocks, no visible cracks, no strange sounds, only silence. At that moment, another SUV entered the campground. 4 young campers stepped out, carrying tents, fishing gear, and coolers full of food. One of them laughed loudly. Perfect weather for camping. Within 20 minutes, the once empty valley was now occupied by 7 adults and 1 little girl. The campground filled with laughter. Children's voices mixed with the sound of the nearby stream. But Daniel remained focused on the cliffs. Max continued barking, this time even more urgently. A few campers began to complain. "That dog sure makes a lot of noise." The little girl's father shrugged. "I'm sure he's just excited." Daniel knelt beside Max. He gently rested a hand on the dog's neck. His heartbeat was racing. That almost never happened. Then, a tiny sound echoed from somewhere above. Crack. Daniel instantly looked up. The sound lasted less than a second, so faint that no one else seemed to notice. Max exploded into frantic barking. Every muscle in his body tightened. His eyes never left the top of the mountain. Daniel followed his gaze. High above, a fist-sized rock slowly rolled down the cliff before stopping against another ledge. No one else paid attention, but something deep inside, Daniel told him that something wasn't right. He immediately grabbed his radio. "Control, this is Ranger Brooks. I need the geological records for Eagle Valley immediately." Several seconds of silence followed. Then the dispatcher answered. "Daniel, What's going on? Daniel never took his eyes off the towering cliff. Meanwhile, Max continued barking without stopping, as if he were desperately trying to warn everyone about a danger that no one else could see. Daniel remained standing beneath the towering cliff. His radio crackled softly before the dispatcher's voice came through. Daniel, we've just checked the geological records. There's a natural fault line running across the mountainside above Eagle Valley. Daniel tightened his grip on the radio. How dangerous is it? The latest inspections classified it as stable, but the dispatcher hesitated. The heavy rainfall 3 days ago may have weakened the rock formation. Daniel slowly looked toward the mountain. The sky remained bright blue. No one would ever imagine that a disaster was quietly building behind those massive cliffs. Just then, Max suddenly sprinted toward the creek. He wasn't running aimlessly. He ran in a perfectly straight line. Then he stopped, turned back toward Daniel, and barked loudly, as if he wanted Daniel to follow him. Daniel hurried over. He crouched beside the clear mountain stream. Tiny ripples kept appearing across the water, not caused by the wind, not caused by the current. The ground itself was vibrating, so slightly that no human could truly notice. But Max could. Daniel pulled out his handheld seismic monitoring device, used by park rangers. A faint vibration appeared on the screen, not strong enough to trigger an official warning, but enough to make him uneasy. Across the campground, everyone continued enjoying their morning. The father was building a campfire. The mother prepared lunch. The 4 young campers were pitching their tents. The little blonde girl happily chased a small red ball across the meadow. Max looked at the girl, then back toward the cliff. His barking became even more desperate. Daniel took a deep breath. He walked into the middle of the campground. "Everyone, I need you to pack your belongings." One of the young campers laughed. "You're kidding, right?" The weather couldn't be better. Daniel remained calm. "I believe this area may be at risk of a rock slide." Silence spread across the campsite. The little girl's father frowned. "Are you certain?" Daniel answered honestly. "No, but my dog has never given a false warning." Several campers glanced at Max, then laughed. "We're supposed to evacuate because of a dog." Another camper shook his head. "I drove over 1,000 miles to get here. I'm not leaving because of a feeling." Daniel didn't argue. Without solid evidence, convincing them would be nearly impossible. Then, a sharp cracking sound echoed behind him. Daniel spun around. A thin crack had appeared across a massive boulder at the base of the cliff, only about a foot long. Then it stopped growing. No one else seemed to notice. Daniel walked closer. He gently touched the crack. Tiny grains of stone crumbled onto the ground. Max stood beside him. His ears were fully raised. His tail hung low. Every muscle in his body was tense. Daniel had only seen Max react like this when facing life-threatening danger. Without another second of hesitation, Daniel grabbed his radio. "Control, I'm requesting an immediate evacuation order for Eagle Valley." The dispatcher replied immediately. "We need further confirmation." Daniel looked around. If they waited any longer, it might already be too late. He made a decision. He would act on his own. Daniel ran from campsite to campsite. "Everyone, pack up immediately. You need to leave this area now." Some campers finally looked uncertain, but no one actually started leaving. At that exact moment, the little girl chased her ball. It rolled toward the base of the cliff. "Mia," her mother shouted, but the girl kept running. Max exploded into action. Daniel sprinted after him with everything he had. Only a few yards separated Mia from the cliff. Suddenly, a boulder the size of a large suitcase broke loose high above. Boom! It slammed into the ground just behind Mia. The entire valley fell silent. Everyone instinctively looked toward the mountain. Dozens of smaller rocks began tumbling down the slope. No one was laughing anymore. No one believed Max was barking for no reason. Daniel grabbed Mia and pulled her safely back. Meanwhile, Max positioned himself between the campers and the cliff, barking relentlessly. Then, a terrifying sound rolled across the mountain. Crack, crack, rumble. Daniel slowly lifted his eyes. His pupils widened. An enormous section of the mountainside had begun to move. Boom! A thunderous roar echoed across Eagle Valley. The ground shook violently. The entire mountainside began to collapse. Thousands of tons of rock surged downhill like a monstrous wave. "Run!" Daniel shouted at the top of his lungs. Panic instantly swept through the campground. People screamed in terror. Some grabbed their backpacks. Others desperately tried to save their tents. A few simply froze in fear. Max charged forward. He wasn't running away from the landslide. He was running along the campground, barking nonstop, as if he were showing everyone the safest way out. Daniel understood immediately. "Follow Max," he shouted. "Don't run toward the parking lot. Head for the forest on the left." It was the only direction outside the path of the falling rocks. Mia's family immediately followed Max. The 4 young campers sprinted after them. The first boulders crashed down. Boom! A wooden picnic table exploded into splinters. Crash! A massive pine tree snapped in half. A thick cloud of dust swallowed the entire valley. The sound of colliding rocks thundered through the mountains. As Daniel ran, he counted everyone. 1, 2, 3. He had to make sure all 8 campers were accounted for. Mia, her parents, the 4 young campers. Everyone was running. But then, one's missing. Daniel looked back. A man in his 50s was still struggling to pull his small camping trailer. He refused to abandon his belongings. "Leave it," Daniel yelled. But the man couldn't hear him over the deafening noise. At that exact moment, a gigantic boulder broke loose from the cliff. Max instantly changed direction. He sprinted toward the man at full speed. Only seconds remained. Daniel felt his heart stop. "Max." His voice disappeared beneath the roar of the collapsing mountain. Max reached the man. He slammed into the back of his legs. The man lost his balance. He fell to the ground. The next instant, boom! The enormous boulder crushed the camping trailer into twisted metal. If Max had been even 1 second slower, the man would never have survived. He lay frozen on the ground. His eyes were wide with shock. Max stood in front of him, barking over and over, urging him to get up. Daniel grabbed the man's arm. "Move." The 3 of them sprinted toward the forest. Behind them, the entire campground disappeared beneath a river of rock. Tents, vehicles, picnic tables. Everything was crushed within seconds. Dust filled the sky. The sunlight vanished. The only sound left was the relentless avalanche. Just as everyone reached the edge of the forest, a terrified scream pierced the air. Mom Daniel spun around. Mia was gone. Her mother froze. "Where's Mia?" Her father looked around in panic. "She was right behind us," Daniel counted again. Only 7 people. Max stopped running. His nose worked furiously. Then he turned toward the collapsing mountainside. Daniel tightened the straps of his backpack. "No, please." Just then, a faint cry echoed through the dust. "Help!" Then silence. Mia's mother burst into tears. Mia Daniel knew one thing. If the little girl was still alive, they only had minutes. The mountainside was still collapsing in waves. Anyone who went back could lose their life. Daniel looked at Max. Max looked back at him. No command was needed. They both knew exactly what they had to do. Daniel turned to the others. "Keep moving to the clearing. Don't come back." Mia's father grabbed Daniel's arm. "Please, save my daughter." Daniel nodded. "I promise." The moment those words left his mouth, Max charged straight back into the massive cloud of dust. Daniel ran after him, high above. The mountain was still falling apart. The sky above Eagle Valley had almost disappeared behind a massive cloud of dust. Daniel could barely see a few feet ahead. Every step could be his last. But Max kept moving. His head stayed low. His nose worked relentlessly. The sound of falling rocks echoed across the mountainside. Daniel stayed only a few yards behind him. He knew that under conditions like these, Max's nose was far more reliable than any human eyes. Suddenly, Max turned sharply to the right. He stopped beside a giant pine tree that had been knocked down by the landslide. Its branches completely covered the ground. There was no sign of Mia. Daniel hurried over. Max, the German shepherd, immediately began digging through the thick layer of pine needles. Then he barked loudly. Daniel dropped to his knees. Using both hands, he pulled the heavy branches aside. Beneath them, a pink baseball cap. The same cap Mia had been wearing that morning. Daniel's heart sank. Mia. There was no answer. Max kept digging. Daniel continued pulling away the broken branches. Seconds later, he saw a tiny hand. Daniel quickly cleared the remaining branches. The little girl was curled up beneath the fallen tree. A massive boulder had stopped the trunk from crushing completely, creating a small pocket of space that had saved her life. If that rock had shifted only a few inches, the tree would have fallen directly onto her. Mia slowly opened her eyes. Ranger Daniel. Daniel let out a deep breath of relief. You're okay. I'm here. Mia tried to sit up. A sharp pain immediately crossed her face. Daniel quickly examined her. No bleeding, no obvious broken bones. She had been badly shaken, but she was alive. Just then, boom. Another wave of rocks thundered down the mountain. The fallen tree shook violently. Max barked immediately. He looked back toward the mountainside. His ears stood straight. Daniel followed his gaze. Another stream of boulders was racing directly toward them. Move. Daniel lifted Mia into his arms. Max took the lead. The three of them ran through the thick dust, but after only a short distance, another giant tree blocked their path. Daniel changed direction. The left side was completely buried by rocks. The right side was nothing but a vertical cliff. They were trapped. Max circled frantically. His nose searched every direction. Then suddenly, he squeezed between two enormous boulders. Daniel looked closer. There was a narrow opening, dark, almost invisible. It looked like a natural passage through the rocks. Holding Mia tightly, Daniel ducked inside. The tunnel was barely wide enough for one person. Max led the way. Daniel followed close behind. Outside, the roar of the landslide never stopped. The natural tunnel stretched for nearly 100 feet. The air was hot and heavy. Dust coated every surface. In a trembling voice, Mia whispered, "Are we going to die?" Daniel smiled gently. "No, because Max isn't going to let that happen." Hearing his name, Max glanced back. His tail wagged slightly. Then suddenly, he froze. Every muscle in his body became rigid. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. Daniel stopped instantly. Max, the German shepherd, stared into the darkness ahead. His ears stood tall. His eyes locked on something hidden inside the cave. Then, a pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared. Moments later, another pair, then another. Daniel slowly reached for the flashlight attached to his belt. As the beam cut through the darkness, he stopped breathing. An adult mountain lion stood in front of them. Behind it, two frightened cubs huddled against the rocky wall. The landslide had trapped them inside the tunnel as well. The animal had nowhere to escape, and now it stood directly between Daniel, Max, Mia, and their only way out, inside the narrow tunnel. No one dared to move. Daniel held Mia close in his arms. Max stood directly in front of them. The fur along his back stood on end. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat. At the other end of the tunnel, the mountain lion never took its eyes off Max. She was thin. Her coat was covered in dust and dirt. One of her front legs was injured, forcing her to limp slightly. It was obvious she had also been hurt during the landslide. But what caught Daniel's attention even more were the two frightened cubs trembling behind their mother. They were terrified. They showed no signs of aggression. The mother mountain lion was simply protecting her young. Daniel understood. If he took one more step forward, she would attack. If he backed away, the landslide was still raging outside. They were trapped between a natural disaster and one of North America's most powerful predators. Mia whispered, "Ranger Daniel, is she going to eat us?" Daniel kept his voice calm. "No, she's only protecting her babies." Max never looked away from the mountain lion, but something about his behavior surprised Daniel. He didn't charge. He didn't bark. He simply stood there, watching. as if he understood that the animal standing before him wasn't truly his enemy. Suddenly, a violent crash thundered from outside the tunnel. Boom! The ground shook violently, then another explosion. Crash. Another section of the mountain collapsed. Dust rushed into the tunnel. Small rocks rained from the ceiling. The mountain lion flinched. Her cubs immediately pressed closer against her. Max also glanced toward the ceiling. Daniel realized something terrifying. If the tunnel collapsed, every living creature inside would die, human or animal. Then, a massive boulder crashed down behind them. Boom! The entrance to the tunnel was completely sealed. Mia burst into tears. "We're trapped." Daniel turned around. The daylight had disappeared. There was no way back. The air inside the tunnel suddenly felt heavy. Daniel switched on his flashlight. The beam slowly swept across the cave. Beyond the mountain lion, a faint ray of light shone through a narrow opening. There had to be another exit, but to reach it, they would have to pass the mountain lion. Daniel tightened his grip on the rescue axe hanging from his belt. He didn't want to use it, only if there was absolutely no other choice. Then, Max did something that completely stunned Daniel. The German Shepherd slowly lowered his head. He stopped barking. He stopped growling. He quietly took one step backward, then sat down. His eyes remained fixed on the mountain lion, but there was no challenge in his gaze. The mother mountain lion tilted her head. She watched Max carefully. Then she looked at Mia, then at Daniel. Silence filled the tunnel. Only the distant rumble of falling rocks echoed through the mountain. Several long seconds passed. Slowly, the mountain lion lowered her head as well. She stopped growling. Daniel could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Two predators, a highly trained German Shepherd, a wild mountain lion. Both somehow understood that neither of them was the real enemy. The mountain itself was. Suddenly, a weak cry broke the silence. One of the cubs had a small boulder pinning its front paw. It struggled to stand, but couldn't. The mother lion turned immediately. She gently licked her cub's head. Her eyes were filled with fear. Max looked at Daniel, then toward the injured cub. Daniel immediately understood what Max was trying to tell him. He took a slow, deep breath. This might be the most dangerous decision of his entire life. Carefully, he knelt down. He gently placed Mia behind a large boulder. Then, step by step, he slowly walked toward the mountain lion, while Max remained perfectly still, ready to leap. The instant the mountain lion made even the slightest move to attack, Daniel stopped standing only about 10 feet away from the mountain lion. The air inside the narrow tunnel was thick with tension. One wrong move, and everything would be over. The mountain lion remained in front of her cubs. Her golden eyes never left Daniel. Max didn't move either. He simply watched in silence. Slowly, Daniel opened both of his hands, showing the animal he had no intention of attacking. Then he carefully knelt down, lowering himself, a posture that signaled he was not a threat. The mountain lion continued staring at him, but she no longer growled. Daniel spoke softly. "We just want to help." Of course, the animal couldn't understand his words, but it could sense his calmness. Max lowered his ears slightly. His head remained bowed. The silence inside the tunnel seemed endless. Then, the mother mountain lion slowly stepped back, only half a step. But for Daniel, it was enough. He carefully took one small step forward. Toward the injured cub, the rock pinning its paw wasn't very large, perhaps 40 pounds. It had probably fallen from the ceiling during the landslide. Daniel placed both hands on the stone, took a deep breath, then lifted it with all his strength. The cub immediately pulled its paw free. It let out a soft cry, then hurried back beside its mother. Daniel stepped backward at once. He didn't turn around. He didn't run. He calmly backed away one step at a time. The mother mountain lion looked at her cub. She gently sniffed its injured paw, then slowly raised her eyes toward Daniel. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then, something extraordinary happened. The mountain lion turned around. She slowly walked toward the narrow opening at the far end of the tunnel. Her two cubs followed closely behind. As she passed Max, she glanced at him only once. She didn't growl. She didn't attack. Max remained perfectly still. His tail gave a gentle wag, as though the two predators had silently reached an understanding. Seconds later, the little family disappeared through the narrow passage. Daniel finally let out a long breath. Mia smiled. Did Max just become friends with the mountain lion? Daniel laughed softly. I think he just saved their family. But the moment of relief lasted only seconds. A sharp cracking sound echoed overhead. Daniel looked up instantly. A long crack was spreading across the tunnel ceiling. Dust drifted steadily downward. Max turned toward the exit, then barked loudly. Go, Daniel, lifted Mia into his arms. The three of them sprinted toward the light. The opening grew brighter. 20 yards away, 10, 5, suddenly, crash. A massive boulder slammed down behind them. The blast of air threw Daniel forward. Even as he fell, he kept Mia tightly protected in his arms. Max rolled across the rocky ground, but instantly jumped back to his feet. Only a few more steps. They burst out of the tunnel. Bright sunlight flooded their faces. Daniel gently set Mia down. Then, he heard the unmistakable sound of a rescue helicopter in the distance. He looked up. A park rescue helicopter was circling above the valley. At last, they had been found. But just as Daniel was about to wave for help, Max suddenly froze. He wasn't looking at the helicopter. He wasn't looking at Daniel. He was staring toward the dense forest on the opposite side of the valley. His ears stood straight. His nose worked furiously. Then, he unleashed a rapid series of urgent barks. Daniel understood immediately. Someone was still trapped, and Max had just found them. The sound of the rescue helicopter continued to echo above Eagle Valley. But Max never looked up. He stood perfectly still. His eyes were fixed on the forest to the east. A series of urgent barks echoed through the valley. Daniel knew that signal well. Max never gave a warning without a reason. He carried Mia to a nearby clearing. Just then the rescue helicopter descended. A rescue technician was lowered on a cable. Daniel quickly secured Mia into the rescue harness. She has only minor injuries. Get her to the hospital immediately. The rescuer nodded. Mia held Daniel's hand tightly. You're coming with me, right? Daniel smiled. I promise. But first I have to save someone else. Mia turned and hugged Max. Thank you. Max gently licked her small hand. Only moments later, the helicopter lifted Mia out of the valley. Her mother burst into tears the moment she saw her daughter safely on board. Daniel had only enough time to nod at the family. Then he turned around. Max was already gone. Daniel sprinted after him. The two raced across fallen trees, jumped over shattered rocks. Everywhere they looked, the destruction from the landslide surrounded them. Loose stones still tumbled from the cliffs. The air was thick with dust and the smell of freshly broken earth. About 5 minutes later, Max stopped beside the edge of a narrow ravine. He barked continuously. Daniel knelt beside him. A blue backpack was caught in the branches of a fallen tree. Nearby lay a smashed camera. Not far away, fresh footprints led deeper into the ravine. Daniel recognized the backpack immediately. It belonged to one of the 4 young campers. But something didn't make sense. All 4 of them had escaped together. Why would one of them come back? Max continued tracking the scent. Then he hurried along the edge of the ravine. Daniel stayed close behind. The path became narrower and narrower. Steep rock walls rose on both sides. Suddenly, a weak voice echoed from below. Is anyone there? Daniel stopped. He shouted back. Park Ranger, where are you? The voice answered. Down here, Daniel carefully moved forward. A deep sinkhole nearly 30 feet deep opened beneath him. An old wooden footbridge that had once crossed the ravine had been destroyed by the landslide. At the bottom, a young man, about 25 years old, was trapped. His right leg was pinned beneath two heavy boulders. He couldn't move. Daniel recognized him instantly. It was Ethan, one of the 4 campers. "Ethan, is anyone else with you?" Ethan shook his head. "I came back to get my camera. I never thought the bridge would collapse." Daniel let out a quiet sigh. He had seen this happen too many times. After disasters, people often returned for their belongings. Max lay down beside the edge of the sinkhole, looking directly at Ethan. His tail wagged gently. As if trying to reassure him, Daniel opened his rescue backpack. But just as he pulled out a climbing rope, another sharp cracking sound echoed overhead. He looked up. Loose boulders along both sides of the ravine had begun to shift. A second rock slide was forming. This time, directly above the sinkhole. Ethan saw it too. His face turned pale. "Please, don't leave me." Daniel looked up at the unstable cliffs, then down at Ethan. He knew, if he climbed down to rescue him, they might both die. But if he stayed where he was, Ethan had no chance of surviving. Daniel tightened his grip on the rescue rope, then looked at Max. The German shepherd slowly stood. His eyes burned with determination, as if saying, "No matter how dangerous it becomes, we never leave anyone behind." Daniel quickly secured one end of the rescue rope around the trunk of a large pine tree standing beside the edge of the sinkhole. He pulled on it several times to make sure it would hold. The tree remained solid, but the cracking sounds coming from the mountainside were growing louder. Time was running out. Daniel looked at Max. "Stay here." Max didn't move. He looked down at Ethan, then back at Daniel, as if he understood exactly what was about to happen. Daniel clipped on his safety harness, then slowly lowered himself into the sinkhole, one careful step at a time. Small rocks continued to tumble down beside him. The air was thick with dust. Above them, large boulders were beginning to shift. Ethan managed a weak smile. "I'm sorry. I never should have come back." Daniel kept descending. "Save your strength. We'll talk later." Finally, Daniel's boots touched the bottom. He immediately checked Ethan's condition. His right leg was pinned beneath two heavy boulders. There was no serious visible injury, but the pressure was increasing. If they didn't free him soon, the shifting rocks could make the situation much worse. Daniel pushed against the boulder. It didn't move. He changed position. Still nothing. The rock was simply too heavy. Just then, Max barked sharply. Daniel looked up. A massive boulder, nearly the size of a small car, was slowly rolling down the mountainside. If it reached the sinkhole, everything would be over. "Max," Daniel shouted. No second command was needed. Max sprang into action. He raced along the rim of the sinkhole, sniffing frantically. Then he grabbed a thick fallen tree branch with his teeth. Pulling with all his strength, Daniel understood immediately. "Push it down." Max gave one powerful shove. The heavy branch rolled into the sinkhole. Daniel dragged it toward the trapped boulder. He wedged the branch underneath it. A makeshift lever. Daniel leaned his full weight onto it. The branch bent under the strain. Slowly, the boulder began to lift. "Ethan, pull your leg free." Ethan clenched his teeth. He pulled as hard as he could. Nothing. Daniel pushed even harder. Every muscle in his arms tightened. Sweat poured down his face. The boulder shifted another few inches. Now Ethan cried. With one final effort, he pulled himself free. It worked. Daniel immediately pulled Ethan away from the danger. At that exact moment, boom! The enormous boulder from the mountainside crashed down nearby. The entire sinkhole shook violently. Rocks and debris rained from above. Daniel quickly fastened the rescue rope around Ethan. Above them, Max barked nonstop. Daniel gave the rescue signal. The helicopter crew had returned after transporting Mia to the hospital. They immediately lowered a rescue winch. Ethan was lifted out first. Daniel watched as he safely rose toward the surface. Now, he was alone at the bottom of the sinkhole. Suddenly, crash! A huge rock slammed down. Daniel's rescue rope became trapped beneath it. He pulled hard. It wouldn't budge. He tried again. Still nothing. Above him, Max barked frantically. Daniel looked up. The entire cliff face was beginning to split apart. The final rockslide had begun. Rocks and debris continued pouring down the mountainside like a raging waterfall. Daniel pulled hard on the rescue rope one more time. It was useless. A massive boulder had pinned the rope tightly against the rocky ground. He only had seconds left. Above the sinkhole, Max barked nonstop. His urgent barks echoed through the crashing rocks. Daniel looked up. He could see the worried faces of Ethan and the rescue team. One of the rescuers shouted, "Cut the rope!" Daniel immediately pulled out his multi-tool. One quick cut, the rope snapped free. But now, he was completely trapped at the bottom of the sinkhole. Just then, crash. A huge boulder slammed into the ground only a few yards away. Dust and debris exploded into the air. Visibility disappeared. Max ran along the rim of the sinkhole. His nose worked constantly. Then, suddenly, he disappeared from sight. Daniel understood immediately. Max was searching for another way in. Daniel quickly swept his flashlight around the bottom of the sinkhole. Beside the pile of fallen rocks, a narrow crack had just opened in the stone. A cool breeze flowed from inside. There had to be another exit. Without hesitation, Daniel crawled into the opening. The passage was extremely narrow. He had to crawl using his elbows and knees. Behind him, the sound of collapsing rocks never stopped. Several times, he had to pause as small rocks fell directly in front of him. The tunnel grew darker. The air became heavier. Just as Daniel began wondering if he had taken the wrong path, a familiar bark echoed through the darkness. Woof, woof, Daniel smiled. Max, the bark came again. This time much closer. Daniel crawled faster. A faint light appeared at the end of the narrow passage. He gathered all his strength and pushed aside the last rock blocking his way. Bright sunlight poured inside. The moment Daniel crawled out, Max rushed straight toward him. He jumped up, his tail wagging wildly. Daniel wrapped both arms around his loyal partner. "Good boy, you found me again." The rescue team quickly ran over as well. Ethan smiled with relief. "I owe both of you my life." Daniel smiled. "No, you owe Max." Everyone laughed. But at that exact moment, a deep rumble echoed across the valley. Everyone turned. A massive cloud of dust rose into the sky. The entire area where the sinkhole had been disappeared beneath thousands of tons of rock. If Daniel had been delayed by even one more minute, no one could have reached him in time. The rescue team leader walked over. He looked at Max with deep admiration. "I've been doing this job for more than 20 years, but I've never seen a dog like him." Daniel knelt beside Max and gently stroked his head. He never leaves anyone behind. The rescue helicopter landed in the clearing. This time, Daniel and Max climbed aboard together. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, Daniel looked down at Eagle Valley. What had once been a peaceful campground was now nothing but broken trees, dust, and endless fields of rock. He knew, without Max, many families would never have been reunited that day. But for Daniel, the story wasn't over yet. There was still one promise. He had to keep the promise he had made to Mia. The rescue helicopter touched down at the Yellowstone Regional Medical Center just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Daniel stepped out first. Max stayed close at his side. The moment the helicopter door opened, a little blonde girl came running. Max Mia threw her arms around the German shepherd. Max wagged his tail happily and gently licked her cheek. Daniel smiled. The promise he had made had finally been fulfilled. A doctor walked over. Fortunately, Mia suffered only a mild concussion and a few bruises. With a few days of rest, she'll make a full recovery. Mia's parents thanked Daniel over and over again, but he simply shook his head. The one you should thank is Max. Mia's father knelt in front of the dog, his eyes filled with tears. He removed the scarf from around his own neck. Carefully, he tied it around Max's collar like a medal. "I don't have anything valuable to give you, but from this day forward, our family will never forget you." Max simply tilted his head, as if he couldn't understand why everyone seemed so emotional. To him, helping others was simply the right thing to do. 2 days later, the story appeared on nearly every local news station. Footage recorded by the rescue helicopter quickly spread across social media. People watched Max race back into the rock slide. They watched him face a mountain lion without fear. They watched him find Mia, then locate Ethan. Millions of viewers were deeply moved. Across the country, people began calling Max the hero of Eagle Valley. Daniel could only smile. "I don't think Max even realizes he's famous." And he was right. The very next morning, Max woke up before sunrise as usual. He sat quietly on the front porch, watching the first light climb over the mountains, as if it were just another ordinary day. A week later, Daniel received an invitation from the National Park Service. A small ceremony would be held in Eagle Valley. The campground remained closed while nature slowly recovered from the disaster. Everyone who had been rescued came back: Mia, her parents, Ethan, the man whose life Max had saved by knocking him away from the falling boulder, the 4 young campers, the rescue team, the park rangers. The rescue commander stepped onto the stage. In his hands was a special bronze medal. "Today, we are here not only to honor the courage of a park ranger, but also to recognize the extraordinary bravery of a 4-legged hero." The entire crowd erupted into applause. Daniel knelt beside Max. The dog looked up at him with curious eyes. The commander leaned forward. He carefully attached the bronze medal to Max's collar. Engraved on its surface were the words, "Faithful until the end." The applause continued for several minutes. Many people wiped tears from their eyes. Mia ran toward Max. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "When I grow up, I want to become a park ranger, just like Ranger Daniel. And I want a dog just like Max." Daniel laughed warmly. "You don't have to find another Max. Just learn to care about people. Protect those who need help. And someday, the right friend will find you." The ceremony came to an end. One by one, everyone headed home. Daniel and Max walked quietly along the old trail, the same trail where the deadly rock slide had taken place. The scars of the disaster were still visible, but small green pine seedlings had already begun pushing through the cracks between the rocks. Life always finds a way to return. Daniel stopped on a rocky overlook. He gazed across the valley below, then gently rested his hand on Max's head. "You know, maybe that day, the person who needed saving the most was actually me." Max looked up at him, tilting one ear. Daniel smiled softly. "If it weren't for you, I might have forgotten what true courage really looks like." Max leaned gently against Daniel's leg. The evening breeze drifted through the valley, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh mountain grass. High above, a pair of golden eagles circled peacefully beneath the blue sky. Life had returned to Eagle Valley, but no one there would ever forget that day. The day when a German shepherd ran toward danger again and again, not because someone ordered him to, not because he expected a reward, but because in his loyal heart, no one deserved to be left behind. Several months later, Daniel received a handwritten letter. It was from Mia. Her handwriting was still uneven, but every word carried warmth. "Dear Ranger Daniel, I'm not afraid of the mountains anymore. I still tell all my friends about Max. Mom and Dad told me that courage doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means choosing to help someone even when you are afraid. I will always remember that. I hope to see you and Max again next summer." Daniel carefully folded the letter. A gentle smile crossed his face. He placed it inside the drawer where he kept his most treasured memories. Outside on the porch, Max lay peacefully in the warm afternoon sunlight. His eyes were half closed. Completely at peace, Daniel walked outside. He sat beside his loyal friend. Neither of them needed to say a word. Their silence spoke louder than any conversation ever could. Somewhere out there, someone would one day need help again. And when that day came, Daniel already knew who would be the first to stand up. Because it wasn't simply instinct, it was the heart of a true hero.